to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is abundance teacher and money coach, Jody Lynn Craven.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
I got so distracted because in the middle of the intro, my cat came up to me and was like, crawling all over the microphone and so forth. So I forgot to put us up on screen, but we had the cleaning people here today and he went and ran and hid. So I think he's happy that they're gone because now he can have his home back again, which, I can understand. If I were a cat, I think I'd probably feel the same way, but welcome. Glad you guys could make it. Thank you for tuning in. And, Jody Lynn, we have an interesting conversation ahead of us here. We have a conversation with a gentleman named Shelley who believes that our families should be run like businesses.
I'm fascinated.
That sounds dangerous. I don't know what you think, but my initial reaction is you could get into a lot of trouble by proposing that idea.
My first reaction was, how efficient. So we're going to see where this goes because I can see both sides.
Yeah, I can see both sides too. So Aaron, first of all, welcome to the program. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks a lot for having me. I'm excited to get into this.
And I'm not even going to try to introduce you any further. You just got to explain where you're coming from. Like, what the hell are you talking about?
All right. Yeah, so that's probably a little confusing for some because a lot of people think businesses are pretty heartless. They're all about just focusing it only on profit and those type of things. So I'll just give you a little background on myself. I did a mechanical engineering degree, so it's all about systems, right? If you want to make an airplane, you need to understand the fundamentals of it. Once you do, then you could make a passenger jet or a fighter, that type of stuff. So I like to understand things fundamentally. I then got a business degree. I worked at a company called Ancestry.com, if you're familiar with them, some of their operations stuff. And then I worked for a startup. And then my wife and I actually, for the last 20 years, have run an Irish dance studio together. So I'm in business. Wow. My wife she teaches the dance studio. She's the director, owner. I do all the technical stuff, website, marketing, cutting audio and stuff like that. So we kind of have that in our own marriage a little bit because we're in business. And then, so I kind of went through a startup, and then I had this period where I could kind of choose what I did. And there was this opportunity to help a guy at a local university research business and family. And he was looking at it like, why do we have more entrepreneurs from certain family structures than we do from others? So we were doing a lot of research in that. So that was kind of the start of it. And in the course of that research, I kind of came up with this model that's in my book now. And I said, hey, wrote about 50 pages up, had the model. Here's how I think it'd work. And he goes, yeah, that's your book, not mine. Right? So I was like, well, I didn't really want to write a book. I was just trying to help you write a book. And then at the same time, I was just consulting with him. And then I was also running on an Amazon FBA kind of business, warehousing, doing that type of stuff. And so I kind of had this opportunity to put together the book and see kind of this interesting overlap between family and business. And then it was at that time, my mom had sent me an article that said one of my good friend, well, not good friends, a friend from high school. He had been in the same church, same high school. He lived, 10 houses away from me. And then my mom sent me this article that he was going to prison for life for rape and attempted murder. Oh. And I looked at this like, wait, what just happened? Like I'd seen a lot of divorces in my life. But then I'm like, wait, this is an outcome that I don't want for my children. Right. I have 4 children. So I was just like, then my engineering brain's like, well, what happened? If you look at
figure it out, right?
Yeah. What happened? Because we weren't like different in terms of our socioeconomic status, which a lot of people will point to. We weren't different in terms of our religion. We weren't different in terms of everything was very close. And then you see this very different outcome. And so I kind of started to obsess about it. And then I actually kind of had most of the book written, and then I got an opportunity to be at a company with about 20 people. Over the last 4 years I worked there, we grew from 20 to about 180 people, and then we got some 54 million of private equity. Then I had a chance to step back, so now I got the book out and can focus. So I've had this weird perspective of business, family, doing business in my own family, and as I grew this last company, especially. when you go from 20 people to 180, it's like, well, their structural changes have to come into place.
Oh, yeah.
Cultural, you have to start thinking like, what's our culture at the company? What do we want to hire for or not hire for? What is our strategy? You know, a lot of companies, when they just start, we're just going to make money. Let's just figure out a way to make money. But then once you get there, you're like, well, how do we kind of hone that in and focus? So that's kind of the long and short of the background of kind of where the book came from and where the ideas came from. So I don't advocate running your business, you know, like you can't fire your children, those type of things. Sometimes we wish we could, right? But there are a lot of things that I find that are very similar in between a family and a business. Does that make, that makes sense?
Well, that helps a little bit. I mean, I'm glad that we're not handing out pink slips to the kids. So that's a good thing. Yeah.
Sometimes they underperform, but especially our expectations.
Well, that's as good a place to start as any, I think. Because in my, admittedly biased opinion, I think that parents really need to let go of expectations. I mean, I think there's far too much expectation that goes on with, you know, at the parent end of things. And I think it messes kids up. You know, probably the best expectation a parent can have for a kid is, you know, do you want to have a happy life? What would you like to do? That's about as far as it should go, in my opinion. But not all parents see it that way. So I'm curious to see what your take is.
Well, I see it. I'm trying to, if we jump over into the businessy side, I think a lot of these kids are kind of trying to figure out where to be productive. You know, I mean, and historically, you would have been son of a farmer, and your dad's like, I'm a farmer. I know how to farm. I'm going to teach you how to farm. And then you would actually start farming from a super young age, you know, being a contributor in that environment, 13, maybe probably. Then you'd be out there working with your dad. And then by the time you hit 18, you would have already had all the skill sets. You know what needs to happen. You understand harvest, seeding, watering, whatever. I mean, my grandfather was a potato farmer in Idaho. So I went up there occasionally and it's like, oh, okay, I can see that. But then his son, he had 200 acres that he farmed potatoes on because he learned it. He also did engineering later, but that's kind of where we see, I think there's a side where I agree with the expectations, like in life. Well, I want you to be a doctor. Well, are you a doctor, Dad? Do you know how to teach me how to be a doctor? Because if you're a farmer and you're telling me to do something that you didn't, how do we even know that path? How do we know how to do that? So I agree. It's like, what do we know in our families? What have we learned? Because just like in a business, if I said, oh, we're like for the, you know, ancestry. Hey, here's ancestry. We know how to do genealogy, but I want my employees to go learn how to do, you know, Google search. What does that have to, or go run a Walmart? Like they're disparate businesses. They have very different business models and strategies, structure, culture, those type of things. So it's kind of, there's a little bit of a challenge because historically, I think our families passed on generationally their wisdom and the skill sets that we needed. I think we've run into a little bit of an area where now, oh, my grandpa was a farmer. My mom left the farm, you know, then she taught school. And my dad, he was a professor at a university, you know, so there's this place where I think our parents don't know, as the technology changes and as it becomes more difficult to be a farmer or rancher, some of those old professions, it's kind of hard to teach your children what should they be doing or what could they be good at and get them involved in that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I kind of like to talk about the whole thing in terms of business models. So if you look at I think it makes sense if we kind of start there from a family. So if you look at Google, for instance, Google has a strategy, and Google's strategy is they're going to organize the world's data, right? And then they have a structure where they hire a lot of engineers and they don't have a lot of managers and that type of stuff, right? They try not to have too many meetings. They try to, you know, give people a lot of freedom. And then their culture is, you know, you don't have to show up on time, just get good stuff done. If you need to work at 4 a.m., work at 4 a.m.
Right.
If you need to, like, they don't have a lot of top-down control, a lot of freedom, those type of things. And those things all work together, that strategy, structure, and culture. That's their business model, and that's how they're using their resources. But if we compare that to another successful company, Walmart, right? I don't know, I think it's tens of thousands of stores now, or 10,000 plus. Their strategy is they're trying to make products affordable for families.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get into, well, what structure do they have? It's much more top-down structure. They have stores. They have to have a lot more, real estate, and they have to have a lot different structure. And then their culture is not freedom and do whatever you want. It's you need to be here on time. You need to get stuff on the shelves on time. But if you look at those two businesses, they're both very effective in, generating billions of dollars in revenue per year. And so that's where I think there's no right business model for a company, right? Then you have Facebook that's doing ads. You have Apple who's building hardware. Everyone has a different business model. And if your business model has a good strategy, structure, and culture that are all aligned, great, you'll do well. But if you took Walmart's culture and threw it over into Google, all the engineers would be like, screw this, I'm out. You'd lose all your talent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can't interchange pieces of different cultures into ones that don't fit. And so if we kind of move over to the family now, if you say like, I want to be an entrepreneur. All right. What type of structure do you need to support that? Is it going to be this very top down? You're probably going to be like, if that's your career in your family, you need a spouse who's going to be like, I'll take care of whatever needs to happen. I've seen it with some of my friends. They're an entrepreneur and then their wife just gets drug into it. Like, oh, I need this. Great. Like whatever needs to happen, you do it. And then what's that culture? It's a lot of learning. It's a lot of failure. I had one friend, he didn't pay his mortgage on his house for 6 months because he didn't have the money. It's like you do whatever, finagle however you can to make it work. Right? It's that culture. But if you came from a family where your dad was a plastic surgeon and you're used to high levels of stability and going on cruises every month or every year rather, and this culture of like, well, we have to act very refined. It's a different skill set for each type of career in each family. And when you start bringing those into each other, that's where you often see conflict. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think about, sorry to cut you off, Walt.
That's
I
right.
think about a conversation that I've had with my husband all the time. I grew up on the farm. I was like 5. As soon as I could like walk and go to the bathroom by myself or whatever and somewhat take care of myself, I had duties on the farm. Like you did not get away from the work. So that work culture of working hard and not really having a set schedule. Like when there was work to do, you worked. My dad has always been entrepreneurial, even though he was never an entrepreneur. He had a 9-to-5 job. He was always like, hey, if you are an entrepreneur, like a farmer, because we always had the farm outside of his job, then you can get tax breaks and this and that. So I learned that early. I learned the concept of investment versus cost early and investing in yourself in your business and growing. And then my husband came from a family where his dad was the manager of the city parks and rec. And so 9-to-5 employee, had a pension, everything else. And even though my husband acts more like a farmer, when we first started dating and we were more serious and I moved in with him, he was like, why are you spending this money on like this branding coach? And why are you spending this money over here? And I'm like, babe, it's an investment. I got to grow myself. I got to go grow the brand, got to do this. And we would often like have this friction between us in the way that I was spending my money versus the way he was seeing it. And it wasn't until we bought our own farm and we started a farm business, a market garden business. And he started to see, you have to invest. And he started learning some of these principles that he was really getting on board. And even now, like literally last night, we had a conversation. He's like, why are you going to spend $3,000 on a photo shoot? Like I could just buy you a camera and just take some pictures. Like I don't get it, because what he sees as value is different. But I come back from the background of when I look at business, I might not understand why he wants said tractor or piece of equipment because I don't understand what he's trying to do with it. But I know that he sees value and that it's going to help him do this, that, and whatever, so I can get on board with it. So I'm liking where you're going with this idea in terms of, knowing at least that if you take somebody who has grown up in an employee mentality family and you stick them with an entrepreneur, there's going to be that friction. But if you knew that before, or you were prepared for that and able to start having those conversations and both people were open, it would be very different than just trying to stick them together and make it fit.
Yep. Yeah, that's the thing. An important part of the structure too in a family is, are we going to be a 2-parent household? Are we going to live with our in-laws, which I call the extended family model? You know, are you going to have your kids live with you? Are you going to, did you get divorced and then you're in a blended family? All of these, or are you going to be a single parent? Are you not going to have kids at all? All of these models, those are all structures, and you can make them work if they're aligned, right? But it's interesting to me, and we talked a little bit about, like you're saying coming together. There's a difficulty too if people are coming from a family without 2 parents, because then they're like, how do you even have a disagreement? How do you have an argument? Is it okay to fight? Like, they don't have the models for that friction and that resolution. Like, yeah, it's okay to be angry at times, and then you cool off, or then you come back together and you still love each other. Therefore it's okay. So you don't really have that model that you're seeing. And so then when you try to get married, it's just much more difficult. And I don't think a lot of people sit there and go, I have no idea how to be married because I was raised in this environment. Like, I know how to do it on my own because I saw my mom do that, or I saw my dad do that.
Yeah.
But I have no idea how I should act. And it was funny when I first got married. I don't know how you guys have been, but it's like all of a sudden I started taking on a lot of the roles that I thought my dad had. And then she started taking on a lot of the roles she thought her mom had. And it's like, we kind of naturally fall into these roles. Like, well, that's just kind of what I assume it should be. Right. And so if you come from a home where the mom's working and the dad's at home, and then he's coming, or, the opposite's there, then you're coming. It's like, wait, we have some conflict on who should be doing what. And there's no, like I said, there's no right answer. It's really just identifying those things and saying, how do we want to work? Right. Even if the dad was the breadwinner and the mom stayed home, if there was an accident and he can't do that anymore, then it's like, well, what do we do? Oh, we just get rid of him. Or are you like, no, now he'll stay home and now she'll work.
Yeah.
Right. Right. So there are cases, where people do say, well, this isn't what I signed up for, so I'm out.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where I see that structure part of how do you live with your family? I mean, I lived with my in-laws for a little bit, and it was challenging because they have their family culture. What's okay? What's not okay? And their structure. And I was like, oh, frick, this is not what I wanted for myself. Mm-hmm. So it's developing those things for your own family and being okay with it. I have one woman I know that I know really well. She lives with her parents and she has 2 kids instead of living on her own. She has the finances to live on her own, but she wants the support for her children. So that's one thing. The other thing that I think is interesting is if you look at a business, to your point, let's talk about your investing. So you're spending money to make pictures, right? That's an action you took. What are you hoping to get in return? You're not trying to get more money you're not going to go sell those pictures, right? That's not the source of the money. So you're getting the pictures. So now you have this asset, right? That then you can use in marketing, you can use in other ways, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is where I break out the resources as well. A lot of people just are like, well, the only thing a business is trying to do is make money. Well, if it was trying to make money, then why does it spend money on branding? Why does it spend money on marketing? Why does it spend money on keeping its employees healthy? Why does it spend money on developing and sending their kids to, sometimes companies will pay for employees to go get more education. You're like, they're not just investing just for money. Everything they do is not just, hey, more money, great. They're looking at it from this holistic perspective of, if I invest I call them social resources, which are like your individual relationships, your relationships with groups, or your reputation or brand, they're doing those type of investing in those social resources, right? And if you were to say, like, we don't need any of those social resources in our company, no sales department, no marketing, no brand, screw this. Every business person would be like, that is a moronic decision, right? This is not going to work.
Yes.
And yet what we've kind of done in our families, a lot of times we're like, well, the guy's making money and now the woman, she needs to go make money too. And that's the priority. Even in some cases they need to, but other cases they don't need to. And so now essentially the family is only getting financial return for their time, but they're not getting any of the social return. right? And so if you look historically, and one great example was Bill Gates' mom, Mary Gates. She actually, she worked as a school teacher. The dad was a lawyer. Then he started his own practice. So he had some entrepreneurial stuff there, but then she had 3 kids, stopped working, invested in her family. Then she started to invest in the community. She was served on the board of University of Washington, served on the board of United Way. And that's actually a connection that Bill Gates had with IBM, because the CEO of IBM was also on the board of United Way. Mm-hmm. So you look at that connection and you're like, well, how much was that worth? Like, if you understand investments and you understand business, you're like, dude, the right person can make massive difference. So just her work, which no one would have considered an investment by the way we're kind of talking about things now, but investing in those social connections and social resources could have been the reason Bill Gates made $50 or $100 billion.
Absolutely.
Right? And so this is where you see in the family, if you don't invest in those resources, you're not going to have them. And I've seen so many people who, like my mom, invests in the community. She's done service in Boy Scouts. She did service in all these other places. And it was funny when I got married, there were so many people. There was like 400 people who came to my wedding, and I'm shaking their hands. I'm like, I don't know you. Why are you at my wedding? This is about me, right? And really what it was they'd be like, oh, your mom, she helped my son get his Eagle Scout. And we're so appreciative of her. And hey, do you need any help? Hey, what are you getting your job? What is your profession going to be? How can we help you? And then it was just this parade of, and I'm like, I don't know, maybe I knew half the people at my own wedding, probably less. And they're like, because she had spent, that she helped women or families get through difficult hardships and go through divorce, all that type of investing, which on the standard, family scorecard, a lot of times, or in the financial scorecard, you can put the number to, hey, I made $50,000 this year. But then she had all these investments, and she helped me get jobs. She helped me get connections for work when I was young, right? All those things you can't put a number to, just like Bill Gates couldn't, but then the results for the family were massive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think we've kind of lost a little bit in our society, where we're so not focused on connections in our society, not focused on social resources in our families. And then we wonder, well, we feel much more alone, and we're not getting as much done, and not as many businesses are starting, right? If you have those connections and you want to start a business, like my mom actually was like, hey, this guy did a lot of real estate investing. Turns out he'd worked on founding a city. I'm like, you can do that? He built a 172 unit apartment, and he just would talk to me because of the relationship that my mom had built with him. He's like, yeah, we love your mom. She's so good. She's helped our sons. And I'm like, this would be, how do I get connected to that without that connection,
Yeah.
So that's a side where I think in our society, we haven't focused, we've become so focused on the financial resources and money. I'm making more money and I'm this boss, sometimes women will be, I'm the boss biatch,
Yeah.
And then you're like, yeah, but what does that mean for your family? And then I think there's also the side, the kind of the financial resources we talked about, social resources we talked about, and then there's human resources, abilities, your time, and your health. And I include mental health, spiritual health in there. Like, who takes care of the family's health? Who cares about it? If people get hurt, who's taking care of it? Who's providing the food, making sure that the family's well nourished, right? Those type of things, that's what my mom did. And then whenever I came home from school, maybe I had a bad day and I failed or did something, my mom would be there and she'd be like, so what happened? Yeah, I failed this test. Okay, well, why did you fail? Help you work through it. So she was also acting as kind of the family therapist.
Yeah.
Right. So you see all these roles that were being played and that are super valuable in a family. Right. I mean, even if you look at it monetarily, okay, I need to send my kid to therapy now. Now I've had people who want to send their kids to, rehabilitation camps for $40,000. And you're like, that was the value that was being provided that you just didn't have a number for, so you didn't quantify it. But now that it's gone, we can see that overall societally, we're feeling a little poorer. We're feeling disconnected. We're in therapy. We're on drugs. We're trying to be happy. And I think it's just like people don't understand to your point about investing, they don't understand all the different ways we can invest in our families.
I'm sitting here, I'm listening, I'm absorbing your enthusiasm, I'm absorbing Jody Lynn's enthusiasm, obvious enthusiasm, and liking all of that. But I'll tell you honestly, there's a piece of me that is still stuck on the main point. What does this have to do with running a business?
Well, business is the exact same in terms of, if you look at a business, all it mainly wants to do is it wants to make money, right? It wants to survive. It wants to grow its resources. And that's running. If you talk about entrepreneurship, which I've done, it's the same thing. I have my business model. I'm going to teach Irish dance lessons in Utah. Okay. I need to spend some of my money on marketing. I need to spend money on hiring other people. So I have more time, more of the human resources. Then I get more of that. Now I need to keep spending. If you're an entrepreneur, you're constantly looking for this flywheel effect, right? Now I have more money. Now I have more relationships. Now with more relationships, I can get better relationships. Now with more money, you have compounding interest. I can make more money, right? So this is where you look at the basics of business are the exact same. I talk about Walmart. It took them 20 years to build their first 1,000 stores. And then between, I think, the years 2011, 2012, they built 1,100 stores in 1 year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you see this, like, now they had the money, they had the structures, they had the culture. They knew exactly how to hire. I mean, can you imagine 1,000 stores in 1 year? How many people do you need to hire? You got to know exactly what all those people look like, how they work. You got to have training for them all. You have to have all that structure in place. So that's where you look at it as a business. And then if you jump over to families just want to we want to get more resources. We want to have a better relationships in our community. We want to have more financial resources. We want to grow our abilities. We want to be healthy. We want to have more time. So at a high level, in fact, if you take it out and just say, I drop you off on a desert island and you're alone, you have a couple jobs: staying alive, getting food, getting water, right? Basic things, activities that you have to do. And if you go to a business, it's the exact same. You want to start a business? Great. How are you going to make money? Who are you going to sell to? Right?
Yeah. I think too, if we take like a wider perspective of what I think you're trying to say, it's really about conscious choices when it comes to building a family. It's not just, like, hey, that sounds cool, awesome, whatever, I'm just going to do it and I'm not going to think about it. And what comes up in my brain is this conversation I've been having in my own family, not only like mine and my husband's, but my siblings, my brother, my dad. My brother has one child and a wife, and they have their family unit. And my brother continuously asks, we've talked about this, my brother continuously asks my dad, like, how do you instill these values, the values you taught me? How do I do that for my kid? Like, my kid needs to come and spend the summer with grandpa and grandma so that they can learn, or a weekend or whatever. And my dad keeps saying, you have to live the values. And that's what I see the disconnect is that my dad is a very strong individual, and whether him and my mom had a conversation about what was important to them in terms of family, I don't know. Perhaps several conversations, but I know that his morals and his values were set. And that's how he lives his life. And that's how we figured out the expectation of us, because his value set was set. They're on the wall, if you will, just like Walmart's is on the wall, or Google. And then we fell into alignment with those values. And I think as my husband and I have a conversation about having children, something that's important to me is instilling our values in our family rather than letting everybody else decide what the value set is for our family. So I want to homeschool our kids, and I want to be around more. And those are things that I want to do because I see the value in those things and it aligns with my values. But I think there's a lot of families out there that just kind of get thrown in the fray and are just trying to survive and keep their head above water, that they're not even having these larger conversations. And we see that ripple out into our communities.
Yeah, I completely agree. I read the book when I was about 20. Well, I was raised by my mom, who's a farmer, right? So she was just like, save, save, save. That was the value. So I knew how to save money. But I was just like, how do people get rich? I can't save this much. And then I played the game that's based on the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's called Cash Flow.
Yeah.
And my wife and I played it together, which I think was great. And I was like, I now understand how money works. Like, I understand the cycle of money. I get assets, I get income, I then have cash flow. I use that cash flow to make investments in money. Then I get income. And this is the flywheel effect that he really talks about and I think shows in his book. And I kind of live that. That's why we ended up doing the Irish dance thing, was because we're like, well, I could go follow after I finished my MBA. I could go be an employee and just bounce like a lot of my friends did between these big companies and try to be an exec, or I could own the asset. And so that's what my wife and I chose to do. But the thing that I didn't, and that worked financially, but then there was a place where in 2007, I made a real estate investment right before the market crashes. It's always a good learning experience. Mm-hmm. And I'd gone from, we're going to make about, $50,000 on this to, now you're in debt by $250,000. Mm. And all of a sudden I realized, yes, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is good at the financial. It's true, that cycle, but he's not taking into account the holistic picture of my feeling of my mental health and the stress that all of a sudden came under the family. I had 4 kids at the time. Now my debt increased by, I think it was over 100%. And I just was like, I want to invest and I want to take risks. But if I'm taking these risks with my whole family, I don't like that. So then my wife and I kind of decided, hey, we're going to pay off all of our debt, which any financial advisor would say, that's stupid. Why would you pay off your debt? It was at low interest rates. Go put it in the stock market. Then you'll get 8% return. You pay all this blah, blah, blah. But they're not taking into account the mental, how that's affecting your psychology. Mm-hmm. Once I got rid of that debt, I didn't have to think about it. I didn't get angry every time I got a bill for this property. I was like, oh, frick, this decision I made 10 years ago, I'm still paying on it, right? So it's like finally getting rid of that just freed up so much of my headspace. And that's where I think most financial people, like people will complain about economists the same way. They're only focused on financial return. They're not focused on the mental health, the physical health, the psychology of the family that's involved there. So I really am trying to, in the book, expand the concept because it's the exact same thing in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's the same cycle. You buy assets, then your business model says buy more assets. Great. You can just do that infinitely. But it's expanding it and saying, and I think for both men and women, I think for a lot of men, they underappreciate and undervalue what the women have been doing in the home. Mm-hmm. Right. Well, you've been spending your time training our children. You're going to homeschool. If you homeschool the children, I did that for a couple of years with my kids. That the time invested is massively important, but you don't get money back in the short term.
Yeah.
But then you build those relationships with your kids. And then when people at school are pushing on them to do things, then your kids come back to you and like, well, I have a stronger relationship with my mom than I do you. Now let's think about it. Now you have more influence. So I'm trying to more expand kind of that model with Rich Dad, Poor Dad to be like, what are your social resources and how are you investing in those? And one of the big ones for social resources I've seen is what groups are you involved with? I've had people, I'm part of a religious group, and I had people come over. I was trying to chop down a whole bunch of these massive trees in my front yard that were coming up through the foundation, coming up through asphalt. I was like, you guys, this is crazy. And there are all these trees coming up, and I'm like, I got to cut them down. And I had this people from my church came, and they're like, hey, you want some help? Then they set it up, got it all involved. There was a guy who I'd never met, but because he was part of the church, and he actually wasn't a member of the church, he just happened to be down from Canada. Like, well, this is the group here. I want to be part of it. So we had this whole group of guys with their sons, chainsaws. The guys are like, most of them are, well, I love using my chainsaw, but I don't get an opportunity. And they were given the opportunity to help see their, show that service was an important part of their business model. Mm-hmm. Right. And so it's like you say with your dad, you have to live those values yourself so that your kids will be instilled with those values and show them the example. But I do think the holistic vision of, are you investing in your health? If you don't invest in your health, like, if you're a billionaire, but you've not taking care of your body and you're decrepit. Are you really wealthy? Is that wealth that I want?
Yeah.
Or if you're a billionaire and your wife hates you and your kids hate you and everyone's using it as pawns and trying to do that, is that real wealth? I don't see that personally as a wealthy side. So I'm kind of trying to expand the prism by which people can understand it, because I think playing the rich dad, poor dad game helped me and my wife have a common language around money. But I don't think a lot of families have a common language around the social resources and the human resources. Because I think I found it with my wife, and I'll go do stuff, outside. I have to shovel the snow. And she'll be like, thank you so much. And then she'll make meals. I'm like, oh, thank you so much. You're caring about my health. Women, frankly, I've heard this one lady talk about it. She said, women keep the human race alive. Like, that's what they've done. They worry about the health. They worry about making sure people aren't taking crazy risks. That's like a huge role historically. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, we underappreciate it. And then we find, well, we're sick and we're unhappy and we're lonely, but I have lots of money. That was amazing. Like, how useless.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting because as I'm listening to you talk and listening to Jody Lynn enthusiastically jumping in with it too, I keep thinking, okay, I get where you're going. I like a lot of the messages that you're talking about. I'm still stuck on the business thing. Let me tell you why. Okay. The reason I'm stuck on the business thing is, and I think I'm beginning to understand where the disconnect is happening. Disconnect may be the wrong word. Where the different valuation is happening here, because I think that what's really good about your approach is you're saying, if we're going to run an optimal business, we're going to get optimal results. Let's take the same idea and apply it to our personal and family lives. The problem that I see is that I don't know many businesses that actually run optimally. In fact, I know a lot of businesses that do not run optimally. And if I look at family resources, I know a lot of families that don't run optimally. In fact, I really have to stretch my imagination to remember, are there anyone that I know who runs their lives optimally? And I have to say, honestly, the answer is no. I'll give you a very extreme example. We were talking earlier about the idea of modeling the way we organize our family on where the income stream is coming in. But what if the income stream is coming in from the dad being a drug dealer? I mean, that's really not the kind of business model that I want to build out in a family, is it? I don't think it really is.
That is actually, I do talk about that. I talk about there is the unemployed and there's the criminal business model that people use, right? Yeah. It's the income stream. To your point, there's some risks. If you're the drug dealer, there's a risk that the entire family is perpetually at risk of just disintegrating. The dad could go away and the income stream should go away. But if your alternative is, I don't know how to do anything else, why would I not do crime? All right. Well, worst case scenario, I get thrown in prison where they feed me. They take care of my health care. Right. So
at least now I know how you're bringing it up in prison. I mean, maybe not drug dealing, but yeah.
Yes. So that's where I see there's some business models, frankly, I don't think that most people necessarily want to support. Right. But everyone has a business model. How are you at a most fundamental level? What actions are you taking to survive? There are some people, because of the safety nets in certain countries. Okay, I have some children. Now I get paid to have those children. Now I'll get government support for where I live. Now I'll get, food stamps or whatever to support me. That is a business model. Now, is it one I want to have? No, but it is one that is currently existing in our society. To your point about crime is another one. I can be a drug dealer. I can maybe do fentanyl or do whatever those things are. I could maybe make a lot of money. I could, join a mafia. Those are all business models. They just have risks involved with them.
Risks involved with them.
But it's really this is where, let's go back to this on the other side. If you look at a company such as Uber, right? Uber was illegal in a lot of the big cities because of the cabs and all that stuff. So they were taking some of those same risks in an effort to, they're saying, well, they call it legal arbitrage in the business world. Well, we'll worry about that when we get there and we'll have enough money and we'll sue and we'll go through all the legal stuff. So this is where I don't want to be prescriptive, right? In terms of a man needs to do X and a woman needs to do Y, and you shouldn't live with your parents, or there's no it's not about me prescribing it. It's more like in business saying, how are you going to, if basic business model stuff, how are you going to make money? What's your revenue stream? Where are you going to spend it? Where are you going to invest? And sometimes those things change over time, right? It's just like, on the podcast stuff, you start out when you're little. Great. What are we going to invest in? We're going to invest in better equipment so we look better. Great. Now we get more listeners. Now we have more money. Now we're going to take that money. We're going to try to get better. Yes. Like this, the whole model in the business world is this series of making investments. And there are some things that are actually different. I don't know that's so different, but in a family, at some point you're like, hey, we're living with our children. Now our children have all left home. Now the amount of work that needs to get done at home is different. So there's some of these life changes that we go through that actually adjust the business model and what the activities need to get done, right? When I had small children, it was mom or dad had to be with the children, or someone did, all the time. My youngest child now is 16. They're like, I come home and I'm like, we don't have family dinner. I don't even know where my kids are. They're off with friends, right? What used to be a thing, and I have, a daughter who's married and another son who's living away from home. So there's that side where in life you're kind of transitioning through business models, and you need to be aware of that. And even when you retire, I was making money from my job, and I would go to my work and I would have all these other people I'd interact with, and I would have my social needs met and my mental health, and then I retire. Well, if all of a sudden your social group just got destroyed because you're not hanging out with them.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Right? Your purpose got destroyed because, now I'm not providing money. What am I doing? So there's this time where you kind of have to think through how is our business model going to change when we get to these certain points as a family. Does that make sense? I mean, I'd love other pokes at the model from a business side, because I think it's really, we're transitioning through it. And if you look at it, the culture, what culture you're trying to develop in those kids is very important. And then there's kind of the last act, we could call it, when you're passing on your wealth to your children. Well, how do you want to do that? It's like your business model was the engine that created the wealth. Right? That's why you have money in the bank, because you had a good business model. If you don't have a good business model, you have no money, right? You may not have good relationships. So at the end of your life, when you go to pass on, like, okay, I have $5 million I want to pass on to my children. But if you didn't give them a business model, it's not going to work out well. Mm-hmm. And there was an example of this girl was 18, I think, and her dad passed away. He was a successful executive, and she got $20 million at 18. But she didn't know what to do with it. She's on her fourth, I think maybe fifth marriage now, right? She's bought and sold companies, and she had to actually get some loans from her mom for some of her stuff just to maintain her lifestyle, because she didn't know what to do with the resources. Mm-hmm. And I can't tell you the number of people who say, I want to be rich. All you're saying is, I want a lot of money. But if I give you that money, you're going to lose it all, usually within a generation. Lottery winners are notorious for this.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not resources that's important, right? If I gave you a McDonald's and I'm like, here's a McDonald's, but I'm not going to tell you how to run it. I'm not going to tell you how to market it. I'm not going to tell you how to hire people. I'm not going to tell you anything about it. It's going to be a crappy McDonald's, and you'll lose it, right? Because you haven't got the business model. Even though I gave you the restaurant, even if I gave you money, right? I gave you that. But if I give you the business model and then I give you the restaurant, then all of a sudden you can take that and flywheel it and actually create more wealth, right? So that's where I think there's this point of, how are you making sure that the business model is being handed off? Because that's actually the most important thing. But they're also, how do you hand off your social resources? I need to introduce my children to my banker, to my lawyer, to my accountant, to the friends that I've made. Right. Mm-hmm. So how do you pass on not just those financial resources, which everyone focuses on, which in the case of this poor girl ended up destroying her life, kind of, which is a tragedy, because the dad had spent so much time wanting, why was he working? I'm sure he said, I'm working for my family. I want my family to have the best. And then it ends up destroying his family. So that's where I think there's this tragedy, but how are we passing on those resources? Because that is what the generation of the wealth came from the business model. The wealth itself is just a byproduct of a good business model.
Yeah. I look at my siblings and just that succession, potential or plan or whatever, and see the same gap there. I'm really close with my parents, so I'm one of their executors on their will, and my brother is another one. And then my other two sisters, they're kind of at the mercy of us telling them what's actually happening, later on in life. But I know that some of the resources that we will inherit, my one sister, both my sisters will do radically different things than me and my brother will. And I'm going to do radically different things than my brother will. And it's so interesting taking that perspective of looking at the whole picture and how you hand all of this down, all the information, the connections, the money, and how aligned it is with your values. Like my values are very closely aligned with my dad's. So I want to do some things on the farm and I want to keep it, and it makes sense. We have a farmer that farms it. So the contracts are already in place. I already know those people. It's pretty much turnkey,
Mm-hmm.
I just get paid on it and got to pay the land taxes. And I think my brother is kind of similar in that sense, but I think my sisters are like, let's just sell it and take the capital now and then retire or do whatever. And it's a completely different thought process for sure.
Well, and that's the sad thing to me. There are places where the business model breaks down, right? If you're a farmer and you have 20 kids, 10 kids, whatever, everyone, it's like, well, we all can't work the same land. We all can't do this. And maybe in our society where I think it's like less than 3% of the people in the U.S. are farmers now, maybe lower than that even, right? So there's this place where sometimes business models fail, right? Mm-hmm. They were good for a time and then they're failing. So there's a point where you need to stay on top of it and learn. And that's where you start to look at what are the values that most of the farmers that I've met they have a lot of good values like hard work, do whatever it takes. You have to figure things out. You also tend to do some type of learning. So there's a cultural value. And then if you take that farmer and then you throw them into a university, they tend to do pretty well because they're like, I get it. This matches my values. But if I take someone from a different environment where, hey, it's more about relaxation, you work hard sometimes, but just don't have the same culture, you put them into a university and then they'll fail out. And it's not a function of, well, the university was bad. It's like there was a cultural mismatch between what they were doing, right? And that's a little bit like if someone wanted to be a doctor, for instance, this is a 4-year plus 3, so 7 plus a residency. That's a 9-year commitment. If you don't have the value of delayed gratification, like good luck, right? You're going to fall out and then you're going to be in debt. So you don't want to have that's what I would call a strategy culture misalignment. Or if you're a doctor and you're like, yeah, I want to get married when I'm super young and then I'm going to be a doctor. Okay. There's some logistics you'd have to work. Well, is your wife going to work? Or if she's doing it, is the husband going to work until the doctor comes into place? And then like Mary Gates, you'll kind of shift away from it. You'll shift to what you're investing in. So it's just kind of some logistical challenges that you have to work through when you see this mismatch.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest value that I hear in what you're describing is the importance of taking a moment anytime that you're at a crossroad in life. You're considering doing something new with your life. You're considering, maybe you're about to get married. You're about to buy a house. There's all kinds of things that could be going on. Anytime that you're at one of those, well, I think what you're suggesting is evaluate what it's going to take to help you get the maximal experience you're looking to get.
Yeah. Yeah. I think and there's also a point where I think you need to look forward, right? If you look forward in, 10, 15 years in some cases, like if you're a blue collar worker, my brother-in-law happens to be a blue collar. He's an arborist. He married my sister and she's 10 years younger than he is. But if you're a blue collar worker, you have to be thinking, this is not going to last. Like physically, blue collar work is just so strenuous. You have usually a 20 to 30 year lifespan in that career. Just like if you're going into the NFL, Okay, you're in there for 3 to 10 years, maybe, right? So you kind of need to look at how well your career is going to function and then what are you going to do after? And a lot of people, I'm not saying blue collar is bad. I worked at the company I was with, we did roofing software to help roofers. Man, those guys can make a lot of money, right? But then I learn how to do roofing and then I start my own roofing business in 5 or 10 years. Now I'm the entrepreneur. Now I can make good money, but I'm no longer on the roof doing all the work, right? Or you see plumbers, you'll see a lot of these blue collar people make that transition, HVAC, those type of things. And then they're making lots of money. But if you're planning like, no, I just didn't plan or think in the future at all. Well, then you're going to get to that point. And then I had my sister did call me up at one point and said, okay, so my husband, I got young kids and my husband's, he's been in some accidents, which usually happens around blue collar work. His body's been taxed. How should I go back to school and get an MBA, get a nursing degree? Should I go get an education degree so I have a job, so we have insurance, right? Because she's noticing the business model is breaking down, right? And so that's where I think you also, as in business, you do annual planning. And there's also things where you look forward, usually 5 years and just kind of say, hey, what do we have coming in 5 years? What does the next year look like? So that you kind of have these things on your horizon. And I think in families, we need to do the same thing of like, how's our relationship going to change once our kids are out of the house? I mean, there was a study I read a while ago where a lot of people in Japan, the husband would retire and then he would go home and then he would piss off the wife and they'd get divorced, right? Because he never figured out, well, what am I going to do with my life and my time? And so that to me is like looking ahead a little bit. To your point, there's crossroads for sure. What major, are you going to go to college or not? What major you choose in college? Are you going to be an entrepreneur? And just understanding how the whole system works so that you can go, I need to focus on these type of resources at this time. Like one example that I think a lot of people don't think about or have a good model for is, okay, if you had a job opportunity in another city for, $30,000 more or whatever, and you're like, great, well, that's such a good opportunity. I'm going to move. Yeah. But if you were in the place you had been for a long time, you're severing all those social relationships, right? It's not that none of those people like you anymore, but now those social connections, they don't have the same ability to provide value to you, right? My sister, she lives in a different state. If she lived close by, I could say, hey, come get free Irish dance lessons. Don't even have to pay for them, right? But because she's in a different state, I wouldn't be like, well, since you're not close to me, I'm going to pay you to take dance,
Yeah, nothing you can really do there.
And so that's where I think a lot of times when people move, they're not taking into account the loss of those social connections. And then quite often, if the mom was staying home, then the mom starts to, I don't have connections. I don't feel like I have a place in the community. I need to go back with my family. Then you'll have more and more stress on the family because you didn't realize all the negative impacts of that move. You just thought about the money. And so to me, when you go through some of those transitions, if you were to move, you'd say, we need to invest a lot of time in what I'd call social investing, right? We need to invest get in an organization, whether it's a church, whether it's those things, and we need to be involved. We need to build that up to the point that we feel like we're now connected, and those type of things, because that's where a lot of mental health issues end up coming from, both for the parents and for the children. So that's the type of stuff where it's trying to look at things holistically versus just being so focused on the money and then giving all the other resources, losing all these other resources, right? If you lost $100,000 worth of social resources for a $10,000 raise, that was a big mistake.
Yeah.
I'm liking a lot of what you're saying. There's some areas that are troubling me still. Let me see if I can bring a couple of them in. One of the things that's really troubling me is that when we reach one of these crossroads in life, and they could be of all different kinds. Now maybe I'm just speaking for myself here. I have a feeling this is actually true for most people. We like to think that we have the information in front of us so we can select, how do we want to go about doing stuff. In reality, when we reach one of these crossroads, more often than not, we are working on extremely limited information. We don't have the whole picture. We have only a little tiny piece of the picture, and we're trying to make sense out of that picture. And so when I look at it that way, I say to myself, well, yeah, it's great if you've got the information, But what if you don't have the information? And we live in an age where there's a lot more information available than there was even 20 years ago, let alone 50 years ago. But even with that, people still encounter these crossroads, and I think they're really crossroads because they don't have the information. They don't have all that knowledge, that background to draw upon. And so we as human beings, we go through life encountering these situations, and really we're making the best decision we can make based on what we know at that time. It's almost never going to be an optimal decision. It's just simply the best one we can make at that point in time.
Yeah, no, yes, I agree. I agree with that. People make the best decision that they see that's available to them at the time, right? That's essentially the why I'm trying to open it up so that people have a bigger lens to look through, right? So do you have any specific examples where you can think through where you'd say, what are some of these crossroads that you?
Oh God. Well, I can think of one that a listener is experiencing right now. The crossroad that he's experiencing, he and his girlfriend, is that they moved to a town in Oklahoma where they didn't know anybody, and they had trouble getting jobs. And when they did get jobs, they didn't pay enough, and they ended up losing their house, and they're now homeless. That's the crossroad they're up against. In the midst of this era of plenty and information and so forth, that's where they're at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you looked at that, I mean, if you look at it from the high level, you're moving in. That's why I say you're moving to this area. What is your connection to it? Are there other people of your religion? Are there other groups that you can join? Right. I mean, I'm in the process, because of my church calling I'm in the process of helping somebody with an employment problem. I've never met him. That's just what I do. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be they call it the employment specialist, right? So I'm going to help them with those type of things. So there's a lot of groups that are out there that want to help people. Mm-hmm. And so I think, but there's been this general trend where people are like moving away from church, and they're like, well, I just don't believe that. But they're not taking into account that they're also leaving this massive amount of resources with it. And I'm not saying you should stay only for that, but I am saying if you're wanking this way, like, well, I like to watch football on Sundays more than I like to go to church. Okay. There's a trade-off you're making, but often you're not seeing, if it's about an hour or two of church, then maybe you're making a poor choice. So I'm just trying to look at it, and I've used this on myself as well. That logic is for myself where I'm like, what am I getting? How am I doing this? And then I look back. I mean, I got 2 of the jobs that were fairly recent were from people in my church. They were like, hey, I know you and I have similar values because we've talked a lot about business over time. And you see this in sports groups too, where, you'll send your kid to sports and then the parents will talk. And then they're like, hey, I kind of know you. You're a known quantity. Hey, you want to come work for me or work with me or those type of things. So if you get into these, I mean, there's kind of those crossroads. And I think to your point, it was kind of a series, you move to Oklahoma. Apparently they didn't have a job, or they didn't understand what was paid, and they hadn't thought through some of the financials, and then things didn't work out like they wanted. So then it's like, are you in a career that you have good skills in? Do you need to retool? Do you have family that, if I was in that situation, I would be like, I would go back and live with my parents, right? Or find a brother or sibling. Like, I would try to rely on those type of resources, right? So it's like, it's just like, how is this different than a business? I think I'm going to start a fast food restaurant, and I make crappy hamburgers, and I spend all this money, and I invested all this money. And then at the end of the day, it's all wasted, right? I have to kind of accept the fact that I have a crappy business model, right?
Well, is it that you have a crappy business model, or is it that you have an insufficient connection model?
Well, that goes back to the point of, if you're depending on what you're trying to do, the connections may be more. When you say connections, you mean the connections with people?
Primarily with people, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be a thing where you would say, I mean, when my wife and I got married, I don't know how you guys were, but when we got married, I was used to living in a home with 6 guys. She was used to living with a home with 4 girls, because we were in college. Every day they would come home. The women would come home and talk and download their day and do that type of stuff. And I think I would come home and be like, yo, what's up? We might kill each other on a video game. And then that was and then it's studied, right? Well, when we got married, all of a sudden, all the activities we used to do, which were around dating, which were with other single people, well, we didn't really want to do those anymore. Hey, let's go to the club and see if we can have other guys pick up on you. Yeah, that sounds dumb, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then my wife and I were like, wow. And then my wife was like, we got to spend more time together. We need to talk more. And I was like, holy cow, I wasn't expecting this. Right. And she happened to be in the dance faculty. So she's like, I have tickets to these dance concerts. And it was just like, all right, like for a little while I can do this, but over a while I'm like, dude, I've seen it enough and I don't really appreciate it to the same level. So then my wife and I was like, again, we were in a religious group. We had our church and I said, we're going to invite every single other couple. It was like 100 couples over to our house. And we invited them over the course of the next, few months. We invited all these couples. And to be frank, the vast majority of them were not couples that we ever did much with again, right? You're like, I don't get along with him and my wife doesn't get along, but my wife found some friends. I found some friends. We found some friends that we could do stuff together with, play card games. And then all of a sudden my wife would be like, hey, I'm going to go to the dance concert with this girl and her husband's going to come play video games with you. And it was like, sweet. And we'll watch the kids even. Sweet. I'm happy watching the kids playing video games. Well, you guys go watch a concert together. Right. And that worked, but it was because my wife and I spent a ton of time and effort inviting 200 people over to our house over the course of a few months. Right. So that's when I say social investing. There's that type of stuff where you actively invite people in your group. There's also going and doing service in the community. Right. If you're disconnected, go do service in the arts. There's usually a lot of, wealthy people support it. I've seen a number of examples where people who had low resources were in the arts and then they got helped by people with more resources. Mm-hmm. So I think service is one of the best ways to build social resources. And so that's where you get into this. You need to invest, to your point. If you don't have the connections and you move and then you go like, oh, we're just going to not do any investing. No, you should be going over to your neighbors. Like, hey, we're new. Hey, go look for, groups you can be involved in, because that lack of social connection, to your point, may have been the cause of them not having resources, not getting a job, right? As soon as someone meets you and they're like, hey, this guy's a pretty cool guy. Hey, there's an opportunity over here to work here. People will help you once they trust you. It's just the people who are, I don't know, the strange people down the street moved in. You haven't seen them outside their house. No one knows them.
They just peek through the curtains.
Yeah, right. They peek through the curtains. Right. So there's this whole thing of, if you're not investing in the social resources, you're not investing in the groups and the community, why would you expect to be connected in there?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
This has been a fascinating conversation. I really didn't know where it was going to go. And, per usual around here, an hour flies by and we're like, oh, where did that hour go? And that certainly has been the case in this instance as well. But, Aaron, first of all, this has been really fascinating. So thank you very much. Second of all, the book, The Family Flywheel, I presume it's available everywhere.
Yeah. Well, it's available on Amazon and Kindle. There's an audiobook. If you want to hear my voice read it, I had to read through it, which was a great experience. Oh, listening to yourself talk for hours. It hurts. And then, I have a website called The Family Flywheel. I have some resources there with some forms to kind of help you think through it. And you can do this as an individual too. Like if you're dating, you're like, well, who am I trying to marry? And if you're in a family, then you kind of go through it individually. Here's my business model. Here's the resources I see. Then the other person in the couple can go through them as well. And then you compare them. Do we have the same mission and purpose? Are we going in those same things? And you can find alignment issues and hopefully get rid of those. Like, here's how we're going to tweak this. Yep, that works for me. That works for me. That's really the most friction in most relationships tend to be a lack of alignment. Mm-hmm. So those are kind of the resources I have. You can also contact me at aaron@thefamilyflywheel.com. I'd love to hear from you if there's reactions or whatever. So those are ways to connect me.
Jody Lane, have we ever had a guest like this? This is pretty unusual, right? This is as far, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's such a beautiful conversation, and a good reminder to anybody that's watching or listens to this conversation, or anybody that you talk to, Aaron, that there is more than just money, which I have beaten this drum in my coaching business. It's not about the money. Like, you think that that's what you want, but it's the other side of what you think you're getting when you have said money. And I think that's what you did for me, Aaron, was really opening up the way that I perceive these social things. And there's some things that I perceive are very valuable and very simplistic things that I didn't see as very valuable, like cooking the meals or whatever. And you've helped me shift into a different space and asking that question, like, who's going to nourish our home and our family and all of these things, and looking at it through a different lens that is equal to the monetary value, or just as important or more important, perhaps, depending on what your value set is. And I think that's a beautiful conversation to have.
And of course, the other thing I like to do with every guest that we have is to thank them for all the giving that they do. You're another giver. You're giving people this new way to think about things. And there are many people you've never met and never seen who benefit from what you have to say. And I think you need to be appreciated like everybody else. So thank you on behalf of those people you've never met and you've never seen for what it is you've been putting out there and what you're continuing to put out there, because they appreciate it too.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate what you guys are doing as well, trying to connect and push that out there. I feel like the more we give, I mean, this is, like I said, this is a part of social resource building, right? Giving to other people, trying to help them in any way you can.
Beautiful stuff. So thanks, guys, very much. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.